usually when we're going, it's more the natural environment that's the hazard. It's the weather that's the hazard. It's the activity that the individual is participating in. That's what caused the rescue. This was something that was just so unique because there was a man-made hazard in the backcountry that contributed to this, and it needed a unique solution because it's not something we've experienced before, probably will never experience again.
Spend enough time around search and rescue, and you'll start to find out there are 1,000,001 ways for people to get into trouble in the backcountry. And it is unfair to assume that everyone is being reckless. Sometimes they just get their foot stuck. Welcome back to The Fine Line. I'm Matt Hansen. In this episode, we bring you another memorable story from a volunteer with Teton County Search and Rescue. It's a story that demonstrates that anything can happen, even in the mellowest, flattest terrain possible, and that search and rescue personnel often have to get very creative with how they solve problems to get someone out safely, including, perhaps, going through the futile exercise of ransacking their own garage for giant pieces of steel. When we come back, join us for a story we're calling Tougher Than a Spud Bar.
Hey, it's Liz Barrett, Brand Director at Stio. We are excited to be the presenting sponsor of the Fine Line podcast. Based in Jackson and fueled by our life here in the Tetons, Stio was founded to inspire connection with the outdoors through premium technical apparel. We live and love the mountain life, and we see ourselves as caretakers of the resources that provide it. Rooted in sustainability and inclusivity, Stio has partnered with like-minded organizations such as Teton County Search and Rescue, Coombs Outdoors, and Protect Our Winters to help them advance their mission. Through this work, we hope to inspire people to get outside and come home safely at the end of the day. 9 winters ago, I moved to Jackson to work for Stio, and to ski more, to bike more, to camp more, to be closer to nature. I feel fortunate to call this place my home, and through my work at Stio, I feel lucky to support the stories of the inspiring individuals that make up this vibrant community. For more stories on the mountain life, visit Stio's Mountain Town Journal at stio.com.
So this particular incident occurred on Saturday, December 1st, 2018. We received a call to dispatch for a 65-year-old male Nordic skier in Teton Canyon, and he had a possible broken leg or knee, some sort of lower extremity injury. It was about 2:30 in the afternoon, and our daytime temperatures that particular day were 20 degrees. And the part of the call that really stood out to me is that the man was reported to be stuck in a cattle guard. Yes, the individual was stuck in a cattle guard and could not extricate himself. My name is Doug Van Houten, and I've been a volunteer with Teton County Search and Rescue since 2015. Though the team is based in Jackson, Wyoming, I live in Driggs, Idaho, where I've been a resident since 2001. I've also been a volunteer with Teton County, Idaho Search and Rescue since 2007. I spent 13 years as a commuter, driving from Driggs to Jackson for work on a daily basis, and also spent quite a bit of time recreating on both sides of Teton Pass. I grew up in north central Wyoming in the town of Sheridan at the base of the Bighorn Mountains, and spent time, once I had a driver's license, spent as much time in the mountains recreating as I could, skiing, climbing, mountain biking. Teton County, Wyoming is 4,216 square miles, and Jackson is located kind of in the southern part of the county. And then there's a whole side of the county that is kind of landlocked from Jackson. And where I live in Driggs, Idaho, we also have 4 other members that live in Idaho but are part of Teton County, Wyoming Search and Rescue. And there's some pretty popular recreational areas within the county that can only be accessed from going through Driggs or Victor. So we have Darby Canyon, Teton Canyon, both fairly close to each other. Also the Grand Targhee area accessed by driving up Teton Canyon. And I think I probably just sat there for a moment, thought about it, like, how stuck in a cattle guard, how are we going to deal with that? Trying to be resourceful, thinking about what did we have as a SAR team, what did I have as an individual homeowner, what could I bring to help resolve the situation. And so first thing I thought of was we need some sort of prying device. So I've got a Spud bar, just a 5-foot steel rod used for breaking up the ground. In Teton Valley, we have about 4 inches of dirt on top of rocks. And so if we ever want to dig a hole for a tree or any kind of vegetation and go deeper than 4 inches, you need a way to break it up. I was also thinking that having several crowbars might be beneficial. So basically just grabbed a lot of heavy steel out of my garage. Hearing that the individual had a leg fracture, suspected leg fracture, and knowing that Nordic skiers typically don't carry much clothing or much things to keep them warm, we had a sense of urgency in our response. The other SAR member that was responding, his name is Philip Fox. He's also an Idaho resident. We spoke on the phone, made a plan to get to the trailhead as soon as we could. I quickly left my house in Driggs, drove to Alta, where we keep a small cache of some gear, including 2 snowmobiles. So quickly hooked up to the snowmobile trailer and then continued to the trailhead where I met Philip. We quickly divided up our gear and figured out how we were going to transport all this extra metal into the backcountry. So we started heading down the trail on our snowmobiles. As we got to the scene, we saw an individual that looked like they were about half height, and other people standing around as we got there, parked our snowmobiles out of the way for other users in the canyon, and approached our subject and quickly realized his leg was not broken, but he was not going to get out of his situation on his own. He had tried several things on his own with other passerbys, tried to help him get out, and none of their efforts helped the situation, made anything better, and actually potentially made things worse. One of the things that we noticed when we got there, he had longer pants on. Those were now pulled up higher up his thigh, and his entire lower leg was exposed to the metal of the cattle guard as well as the air temperature that was in the canyon that day. Teton Valley Fire from Driggs initially responded to this call as well. They drove to the trailhead. As we were driving in, they were leaving. They got to the trailhead, having heard that an individual had a broken leg. They didn't have a way to access the patient. It was a several-mile walk up the trailhead. And also with the individual being stuck, they really would not be able to provide patient care and transportation just due to the situation at that time. So as we approached the subject and spoke with he and his wife, we learned that he had stopped Nordic skiing to make an adjustment to his boot. There was something that was irritating his boot. And he stopped at the cattle guard and thought, the diagonal at the side of the cattle guard would be convenient so that he could adjust his boot more easily. So he had one leg planted in the snow, the other on the diagonal for the cattle guard to make his boot adjustment. And when that happened, his leg ended up dropping through the 18 inches of snow bridged over the cattle guard. And the momentum of his fall took his foot, his calf, and then ultimately his knee joint through the slats of the cattle guard, and he got stuck. And all of his efforts to try to extricate himself, whether it was pulling up his pant leg or having other people try to help pull him out, nothing was working to extricate him from that situation. Several people trying to help support his shoulders, like underneath his armpits, like, let's just give this another try. We've got more people here. We're fresh. Let's see if we can help. Nothing was working. It was just too painful to try to pull the knee joint past the cattle guard, and just needed to figure out another solution. So we had our Spud bar, we had several crowbars, we had several people, and so we just started trying to pry the cattle guard just to see, can we make any more gap, any more distance that would allow the knee to slide past the barriers that were keeping him stuck there. And 5-foot long piece of steel, like, oh, that's going to be our best bet. Like, that's the thing that's going to work the best. And when we put multiple people on that bar trying to flex or spread the bars, like, it didn't even budge. And so that was a little defeating because that was our best bet. And so, like, okay, let's try multiple people with crowbars and just trying to whatever leverage we could put. Nothing was working. Right at that cattle guard, there was a fence trying to keep cows, where they were supposed to be. And there was a buck rail fence. And so we ended up even grabbing a 12-foot long piece of buck rail fence, thinking, well, maybe this might work. It may not be stronger than the steel, but we might be able to get more leverage with the length. And that didn't work either. And so we were sitting there looking at each other, just wondering, well, what other resources we have? And I don't recall who mentioned it, but the fire department deals with vehicle extrications, and they were just here. This was minutes before we were passing them in the parking lot. And so we had radio communications from where we were. Cell phones didn't work, but we called on the radio and requested, can the fire department come back? Because they have equipment to extricate people from damaged vehicles. Like, that's our next best bet. And so we ended up leaving, going back to the trailhead with our snowmobiles, and the fire department had a toboggan. We tied that back to the back of one of the snowmobiles using some rope and placed their equipment that they had a generator, an abrasive saw, kind of like a big circular saw, about a 12-inch blade, and the jaws of life. I think most folks may be familiar with the jaws of life, used for cutting metal, spreading things apart. Figure, oh, this will be the solution. We'll be able to get the jaws of life back there, get them out. So we towed the toboggan, transported the firefighters that were on the fire truck to operate the equipment, transported them back to the incident scene, and just started helping support them, and let's figure out what we can do with the equipment that they brought. So the generator is used to power the hydraulic pump for the jaws of life. And so the firefighters got that started and put the jaws of life between the slats of the cattle guard. Still nothing happened. Like, nothing moved. Like, the generator was running, creating noise, the jaws of life, the hydraulic pump, like, there were noises. One of the noises was not metal distorting. Nothing was moving.
You're listening to The Fine Line. We'll be back after this short break.
This episode of The Fine Line is sponsored by Arc'teryx. Based in the Coast Mountains of British Columbia, Arc'teryx specializes in technical, high-performance apparel, outerwear, and equipment solutions to meet the needs of the mountain athlete and Teton County Search and Rescue volunteers. When you see TCSAR members out there wearing yellow jackets during a rescue mission, you know they are wearing the Alpine Guide jacket from Arc'teryx. Learn more at arc'teryx.com.
So the other piece of equipment that the fire department brought back was a large circular saw that had an abrasive metal cutting blade. And this was the next thought. Let's try cutting some metal. And so there were supports between the parallel slats of the cattle guard that were tying those together. And so I think at that point, our collective thought was that if we can weaken that the jaws of life may work to spread the slats apart, creating enough space to extricate the leg. That created some other challenges. So if anybody thinks of an abrasive saw, if you've ever seen a grinder disc or a cutting wheel cutting on steel, there's lots of sparks that are created. This brace holding the slats together was also near our patient's leg. If you recall, his pant leg was pulled up to try to extricate him. So now he had bare skin, and now he suddenly throws sparks and hot molten metal into the mix. And so we ended up taking one of the turnouts from one of the firefighters and then wrapping our subject's leg with the turnouts. They're fireproof. They're going to provide some protection. The nylon insulated coat that we had covering his leg, providing heat, that was not going to protect against the sparks. That was just going to melt pretty quickly. And then started cutting with the abrasive blade. Cut for a little bit, tried the jaws of life, and suddenly we had a glimmer of hope. There was some movement, not enough at that point, but realized that, hey, this is actually contributing and helping. So just continued cutting some more, and finally within a few minutes afterwards, finally was able to cut the metal enough that the jaws of life spread the slats apart, and then suddenly we had our patient freed. I think we all felt some elation at that point because the individual had been there for several hours at that point, even before we arrived. He'd been stuck there for a while. And just the sense of relief of getting him out. I'm sure there were some high fives, may have been some hugs, probably between the subject and his wife. Just, having a situation that was very challenging to resolve and not having really the right resources or even having the right plan of how is this going to work. We just tried option A, that didn't work. Option B didn't work. Option C, just the jaws of life didn't work. But option D, using the abrasive saw cutting, we had to go through multiple thoughts like, maybe this will work, let's try it. And just being able to have some success with that, get our patient out. The sun is starting to set, December. We were called at 2:30. At this point, it's after 4, and the sun is starting to set. And where we were was behind where the sun is setting. So it's getting dark. And as it's already cold, it's getting colder. And so just being able to get our patient out was a huge sense of relief because we'd started thinking about plan E, but we were putting our majority of our efforts into plan D. I think, a couple of things really stick with me and why this is still something that I think about regularly is just the uniqueness of the rescue. Usually when we're going, it's more the natural environment that's the hazard. It's the weather that's the hazard. It's the activity that the individual is participating in. That's what caused the rescue. This was something that was just so unique because there was a man-made hazard in the backcountry that contributed to this, and it needed a unique solution because it's not something we've experienced before, probably will never experience again. I'm a Nordic skier. I go up Teton Canyon. I ski past this cattle guard and think of this every single time that I go past that cattle guard. But just the uniqueness of this, and that it was an individual that wasn't doing anything risky. Like they were just out for a Nordic ski, just wanted to make an adjustment to their boot. And then just the collaboration and creative problem solving, like how many SAR missions involve the jaws of life in an abrasive blade. You never know what you might need to get the job done.
That was Doug Van Houten, a volunteer with Teton County Search and Rescue. This story was recorded in the studios of KHOL 89.1 FM in Jackson. For more stories that will keep you light on your feet, subscribe to Jackson Unpacked, a weekly news podcast produced by our partners at KHOL. Our theme song is by Anne and Pete Sibley, with additional music, including this track, produced by Victor, Idaho artist Ben Winship. Our editing is by Melinda Binks. The original cover art is by Jen Reddy. And my name is Matt Hansen. We'll be back with another episode in just a few weeks. You can learn more about The Fine Line and find the show's entire archive by visiting us at backcountryzero.com.